Today we're going to focus on decimals, specifically multiplying and dividing decimals. This can be found in chapter section 2. For multiplying decimals, we're going to follow 3 steps. We're going to find the total number of decimal places in both factors. So we're going to go ahead and count those decimal places. Then we're going to multiply the decimals, the numbers, just like they're whole numbers. So we're going to ignore the decimals now and multiply them just like they're whole numbers. Then number 3, then we're going to add in, we're going to place in the decimal points so that the product has the same number that we originally counted of decimal places as the total of decimal places in the factors. So let's take a look at this. 4 times 5.7. Let's count the number of decimal places. There's 1 decimal place between the 5 and 7. So now I counted that 1, so there's 1 decimal place. Now I multiply 5.7, or 5, 7, 57 times 4. I ignore the decimal point now. I multiply just like I'm dealing with whole numbers. 7 times 4 is 28. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 2 is 22. So I have 228. But I'm not done. I have to bring the decimal points back. And I counted 1 place, so I'm going to add that 1 place in. Let's multiply again. Remember, parentheses refers to multiplication. Count my decimal places. I have 1 decimal place in the 0.8. And for the 0.659, I have 3 decimal places. So that's a total of 4 decimal places. 1 for the 0.8 and 4 for the 0.659. So now I'm going to multiply these as if I'm pretending or forgetting the decimals. So I'm going to multiply 659 times 8. 9 times 8, 72. 5 times 8 is 40 plus 7, 47. 6 times 8 is 48 plus 4. That gives me 52. So that's 5,272. But that's not the answer because I have to add in those 4 decimals. I go ahead and add the 4 decimals. That's a 0.5272. And we remember if there's a point there, the 0 will be that kind of placeholder in front. Now I'd like you to go ahead and multiply these 4 numbers and then check your answers. So go ahead, pause the video now. Now go ahead and check your answers. Here we're going to do some practice problems. I have 4 different examples we're going to focus on. Here's the first example. We have Lucy, Mia, and Elodie. They went to the store. Lucy bought a spiral notebook for $1.89. Now we have something called sales tax. Sales tax usually deals with a percentage, but we didn't learn percentages yet in this class. So let me help you with that. 5% is going to be 5 out of 100. Okay? 100 is that percentage, 100%. Is what we're dealing with. So 5% out of 100, how do we do that? We're going to move the decimal point 2 places over. Because 100 has 2 zeros, we're going to take that 5%, okay? The point is to the right of the 5, and we're going to move it to the left 2 places. So 5% is 0.05, and I'm going to multiply that 0.05 times 1.89. So I count up my decimals. There's 4 decimals there. And this would be my answer. It would be 945, but 4 decimal places I need to count. I'm going to place that in. I'm going to put in my 0 placeholders. I'm going to annex my zeros. So here's the problem. I want it to the nearest cent. So remember, out of $1, I don't have 0.0945 cents. Out of $1, I'm only going to the tenths and hundredths place. Okay, so I'm only going to the hundredths place. That would be where the 9 is. So I look to the thousandths place, and I see if that's greater or less than 5. It's less than, so the 9 does not round up. Okay, let's do this again. We have 7%. Remember, 7 is out of 100. 100 has 2 zeros, so I'm going to take 7.0 and I'm going to move it over because I'm dealing here with 7. I'm going to move it over 2 places to the left, and that's going to be 0.07. Now we have Lincoln, Cooper, Ashton, and Travis. These 4 boys, went to the mall. If Travis spent $17.98, how much did he pay in tax? So we want to go ahead and take that 7%, turn it into the decimal, which we have 0.07. We're going to multiply it by $17.98, and then I want to round it to the nearest cent, only 2 decimal places over. So when I multiply this, okay, we're going to multiply 1,798 times 7. We're going to ignore those decimal places because we did count that there's 4 decimals. So I multiply. I get 12,586. Then I go ahead and add in our 4 decimal places, but I'm not done yet because I want to get rid of the thousandths and hundredths place. So I want to look at the tens and the hundreds. So here's the 5. Now I look at the thousandths place and I see if the 8 is greater than 5. It is. So I'm going to round that 5 up to a 6. Okay, here's our third example. Mr. and Mrs. B go on a date. The meal costs $65.73. Mr. B wants to tip 15%. Wow. How much did he pay for the tip? Round to the nearest cent. Remember, 15%, if we have 1, 5, and then we have the point here, we're going to move that point over 2 places to the left to make it 0.15. I'm now going to add the decimals. So there's 4 decimals, and then I'm going to multiply. When I multiply, I'm going to get 98,595. I plug in the 4 decimals, and that goes between the 9 and the 8. Now I need to get rid of the 9 and the 5 at the end because we're doing to the nearest cent. But before we do that, we have to look at the 9. That's greater than 5, so that rounds up the 5 to a 6. So that gives us $9.86. Now, if you're having any difficulty or trouble on this, please send me an email or Marco Polo or come for the Zoom help, and we'll talk about this together. But here we have one more example. Miss Teagan and Ella Grace both get $50 for taking care of Sparky while Mr. B and Mrs. B go on their date. If we're asked to tithe 10% of the money that we receive, how much should each of the girls tithe if they both received $50? So remember, we're going to take that 10%, okay? So 10, the decimal would be to the right of the 0. We're going to move it over 2 places. That would give us 0.1. So 50 times 0.1. I'm going to add in how many decimal places. There's 4 decimal places, so that's going to be $5. Now there are 4 steps in dividing decimals. Number 1, place the decimal point in the quotient directly above the decimal point in the dividend. Remember, the dividend is what's being divided, okay? It's in the little division symbol, or the little division bar. Remember, you have to know these terms. That's why we memorize these terms, because when we get to a word problem like this, you're going to have to be able to recognize. So you need to know quotient and dividend. Then you're going to divide, just like you're dealing with whole numbers. Then you're going to check your work by multiplying the answer. Then number 4, you're going to annex any zeros that you need to add. So here's 8 divided into 3.42. Okay, 3.42 is our dividend. We're going to go ahead and place the decimal above the decimal in the dividend, and then we're going to go ahead and divide, and we get 0.4275. We take that number and we multiply it by 8 to check it to see if it came to 3.42. Here are 4 practice problems. I'd like you to pause it now, try these 4, and check your work. Okay, check to see if you got the right answer. Now there are 2 steps for dividing decimals to a specific place. You're going to first divide the decimal by the whole number and continue dividing to 1 digit beyond the rounding place. So when we say specific place, this is saying if they're asking you to round to the hundredths place, round to the thousandth place, you're going to have to round past that number because you have to look at what are you rounding up to or rounding down to. So number 2, then you're going to round the quotient to the desired specific place. So let's take a look at that. Okay, it's asking you to round to the tenths place. So 39 into 263. You're going to go ahead and divide. And I'm going to do 6 times 39, 7 times 39, 4 times 39. Now, remember, before I did the division, I'm going to bring that decimal place up straight above the dividend, and I'm going to stop at the hundredths place because I want to round to the tenths, which is the 7. So I have to keep dividing to the hundredths. So I can look at the 4 and see, is this greater than 5 or not? It's not. So it'll just be 6.7. Okay, so I want to round past that. I want to round past the tenths place to see, will I round up or down? Now, dividing by a decimal, number 1, I'm going to make the divisor a whole number by multiplying by a power of 10. I'm going to multiply the dividend by that same power of 10. So really all I'm doing here, I'm basically going to move the decimal places, how many places over to the right for both the divisor and the dividend. And then remember, we do want to place that decimal point in the quotient. We're going to divide, and then we're going to check by multiplying. So here's the example. Okay, we are dealing with dividing decimals. So if I have 0.15 divided into 2.46, the focus here is I need to get rid of that decimal in my divisor. If I'm going to move it 2 places over to get rid of that decimal, I'm not just going to throw away the decimal, I need to move it 2 places over. So I move the decimal 1 place over between the 1 and 5, and then I move it 1 more place over, okay, to the right of the 5. Now if I do it to the left side, if I do it to the divisor, I have to do it to the dividend. So I moved it 2 places over, so now I'm going to move the decimal 2 places over in the dividend. So I moved it from 2.46, I moved it 2 places to the right of the 6. So if I do it to the divisor, I do it to the dividend. And then I bring the decimal point up, and then I go ahead and divide, and then make sure you check your work. And there you go.